Some girls counted the days until their lives began. I counted dollars and prayed the numbers would stop hurting before sunrise. That morning, the kitchen light in my apartment flickered above me like it was tired too, buzzing over the cracked table where I had spread every bill I owned. Ones. Fives. A roll of quarters from the coffee can beside the stove. $73.40. That was all that stood between my mother's prescription, my overdue rent, and the kind of phone calls that made my chest tighten before I even answered. My name was Claire Bennett. I was 26 years old, a waitress in Boston, and I had become very good at making empty things look full. Empty refrigerator. Full smile. Empty gas tank. Full apology. Empty bank account. Full shift, then another one after that. Rain tapped against the window over the sink, turning the alley outside into a gray smear of brick, fire escapes, and trash bins. My uniform hung from the cabinet handle where I had washed it by hand the night before. Black dress shirt, black pants, black apron. All faded at the seams but clean enough if nobody looked too closely. People rarely looked closely at waitresses unless something went wrong. My phone vibrated beside the pile of bills. I already knew it was the pharmacy before I saw the number. The woman on the line had a kind voice, which somehow made it worse. She reminded me that my mother's medication could not be released until the remaining balance was paid. $186. She said it gently, like gentleness could make the number smaller. I thanked her because that was what I did. I thanked people for bad news. I thanked landlords for extensions they refused to give. I thanked customers who snapped their fingers at me like I was a light switch. I thanked life every time it took something and left me with just enough pride to stand up again. After the call, I stood very still, one hand on the edge of the table, listening to the refrigerator hum over nothing. My mother was asleep in the next room, the old floral blanket pulled to her chin, her breathing soft but uneven. She had been a nurse for 30 years before her body decided to betray her slowly. She used to come home with sore feet and peppermint gum in her pocket, smelling like hospital soap and coffee. Now I was the one leaving before dawn and coming home after midnight, trying to be brave in the same city that had worn her down. I dressed quietly, buttoning my shirt with fingers stiff from exhaustion. My eyes in the bathroom mirror looked blue only when the light was kind. That morning they looked pale, almost colorless, set above shadows no concealer could fully hide. I pulled my light brown hair into a low ponytail, practiced my customer service smile, and hated how believable it still looked. By the time I reached Sorrento's on Hanover Street, the rain had turned sharp and cold, blowing sideways between brick buildings and parked cars. The restaurant glowed warm through tall windows, all brass fixtures, white tablecloths, and expensive wine bottles lined up like trophies. Inside, the air smelled of garlic, lemon polish, and money. Mark Sullivan, my manager, stood near the host's stand with a tablet in one hand and irritation already settled into his face. He looked me over, from my damp coat to my worn shoes. "You are 2 minutes late, Claire." I swallowed the apology before it became automatic. The bus stalled on Congress Street. He did not care. Men like Mark never cared about the distance between survival and lateness. He leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to make it personal. "You are taking the VIP section alone tonight. I need someone who will not complain about extra hours." My stomach sank. The VIP section meant rich guests, impossible standards, and no mistakes. I opened my mouth, thinking of my mother, the pharmacy, the $73.40 waiting uselessly at home. Mark smiled without warmth. "Poor girls should be grateful for extra hours, Claire." Then the front door opened behind him, and the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. The man who stepped inside did not look around the way customers usually did. Most people entered Sorrento's searching for someone to impress, someone to ignore, or someone to blame if their reservation was not ready. This man entered like the room had already been measured and found acceptable. He wore a black wool coat darkened at the shoulders by rain, a charcoal suit beneath it, and leather gloves he removed one finger at a time while the host's stand went silent. 2 men came in behind him, both in dark suits, both quiet, both scanning the restaurant with the kind of attention that made my skin prickle. Mark straightened so quickly his tablet nearly slipped from his hand. His voice changed too, smoothing itself into something polite and nervous. "Mr. Cole, we have your table ready." Damien Cole. I had heard the name only once, whispered by a bartender after closing when he thought no one was listening. A man connected to half the private clubs near the waterfront. A man politicians smiled at carefully. A man whose money moved through Boston without leaving fingerprints. I did not know what was true. I only knew that every wealthy man in the front dining room suddenly became quieter when Damian Cole passed their tables. He was maybe 35, tall, white-skinned, with dark hair combed back from a face too controlled to be called handsome in any ordinary way. Sharp cheekbones. Clean jaw. Eyes the color of cold steel. He did not smile. He did not need to. Mark led him to the corner table near the windows, the one reserved for people whose tips could change a server's entire week. Or ruin it. I grabbed 3 leather menus and filled a water pitcher, feeling the ache in my feet climb into my knees. My stomach was empty except for coffee and panic. My mother's pharmacy balance sat in my head like a timer. $186. Due before closing. I approached the table with the practiced warmth that belonged to my job and not my life. Good evening. Welcome to Sorrento's. My name is Claire, and I will be taking care of you tonight. Damian Cole looked up. His eyes landed on my face and stayed there half a second longer than manners required. Not rude. Not hungry. Observing. That was worse. I was used to being overlooked, snapped at, waved away. Being seen felt almost indecent. Like someone had opened a window in a room where I had been hiding. Water, he said. Please. The please startled me. Men like him usually saved courtesy for people above them, and from what I could tell, Damian Cole did not believe many people were above him. I poured water into the first glass, then the second. My hand trembled near the third, not enough to spill, but enough for him to notice. Of course he noticed. His gaze dropped to my fingers, then to the faint red marks near my knuckles from scrubbing my uniform in the sink. I pulled my hand back too quickly. Are you ready to hear the specials? I asked. One of his men nodded. Damian did not. He kept watching me as if the answer was written somewhere under my smile. Behind me, Mark's voice cut through the room. Claire, table 4 needs bread, and table 9 is waiting on wine. I turned halfway. I am on it. When I moved, the quarters in my apron pocket shifted. One slipped free, hit the floor, and rolled beneath Damian's chair with a bright silver sound that seemed far too loud for such a small amount of money. Heat rushed to my face. I crouched fast, embarrassed before anyone could laugh, but Damian was faster. He leaned down, picked up the quarter and held it out. Our fingers did not touch. Still my breath caught. The folded paper in my other hand had slipped from my apron pocket with the coin. The pharmacy bill. Crumpled. Damp at the edges. Impossible to hide now. Damian's eyes moved from the paper to my face. He did not ask what it was. He had already read enough. I reached for it, but his hand closed gently over the edge, not trapping me, only stopping the lie before it could stand. For one quiet second the restaurant blurred around us. Then he said, low enough that only I could hear, "How much time do you have before they stop waiting?" I pulled the pharmacy bill from his hand before my shame could become something visible. Paper crumpled loudly in my fist. It was such a small sound, but it made my face burn. Around us, Sorrento's kept breathing. Forks touched porcelain. Wine poured into crystal. Someone laughed near the bar like the world was still an easy place to live in. I tucked the bill back into my apron and gave Damian Cole the smile I use for people who ask questions they had no right to ask. Would you like to hear the specials, sir? His eyes held mine for 1 second. Then he leaned back in his chair, allowing the subject to close even though we both knew it had not ended. Yes, Claire. My name sounded different in his voice. Not familiar. Not soft. Just precise, like he had decided it was worth remembering. I listed the specials from memory while Mark waved at me from across the dining room, his irritation sharpening with every second I spent at the corner table. Seared scallops. Braised short rib. Handmade lobster ravioli. Words for people who could spend $80 without thinking, while I calculated whether I could skip groceries and still cover half my mother's prescription before midnight. Damian ordered simply. Black coffee first. Dinner later. His men ordered without looking at the menu. I wrote everything down with hands that had learned to keep working even when the rest of me wanted to disappear. The next hour broke itself over me in pieces. Table 4 wanted new bread because the first basket was not warm enough. Table 9 said the wine tasted flat, though they had chosen it themselves. A woman near the window snapped her fingers at me 3 times while I balanced 6 plates against my arm. Mark added 2 more tables to my section and told me to move faster with that bright public smile managers wore when cruelty needed to look professional. Every time I passed Damien's table, I felt his attention follow me. Not like a man watching a woman. Like a man watching a storm form over water. At 8:40 my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Then again. I did not have to look. The hospital billing office had been calling all afternoon. I ducked into the storage hallway for 10 seconds, just long enough to breathe between metal shelves stacked with napkins and imported olive oil. The air smelled like cardboard and dust. My hand shook as I opened the voicemail. A woman's recorded voice reminded me that payment arrangements required action before the end of the business day. Business day. As if sickness cared about office hours. I pressed the phone to my forehead and whispered, "I just need 1 more week." The words came out so quietly I barely heard them myself. But someone else did. I looked up and saw Damien standing near the open end of the hallway, half in shadow, his black coat gone now, charcoal suit immaculate under the dim service light. He should not have been there. Customers did not come back here. Men like him especially did not stand beside stacked linen bins and broken mop buckets. "This area is for staff," I said, wiping my face fast even though I had not cried. "Not yet. I was looking for the restroom. It is clearly marked by the bar." Then I was looking for the wrong thing. I hated that my pulse changed. Hated that he had heard me begging the universe for 7 more days. "Please go back to your table." He did not move closer. That mattered, though I did not want it to. "How long have you been carrying everyone alone?" The question hit harder than pity would have. Pity looked down. This looked straight through me. I folded the phone into my palm until the edges pressed my skin. "That is not your business." "No," he said. "It is not." "Then why ask?" His gaze dropped for a moment to my apron pocket where the bill hid like a bruise. "Because nobody in that room hears you breaking. They only hear when the glass hits the floor." My throat tightened so suddenly I had to look away. In the kitchen beyond us, plates clattered and Mark called my name with impatience sharpened into a blade. I straightened because that was what I did. I stood even when standing felt like another form of falling. "I am not breaking," I said. Damien's expression did not change, but his voice lowered. "No. You are surviving. There is a difference." For one dangerous second, I wanted to believe someone could know that difference and not use it against me. Then Mark appeared at the hallway entrance, eyes narrowing as he took in Damien, then me. "Claire," he said, each letter wrapped in warning. "VIP guests do not wait because you need a personal moment." I stepped past Damien before he could answer, because defending me would only make Mark worse later. But as I returned to the dining room, I heard Damien's voice behind me, calm and cold enough to stop every sound in the hallway. "Then perhaps you should learn what your staff is carrying before you ask them to carry more." Mark did not answer Damien. Men like Mark were loud only when they believed the room belonged to them, and for the first time that night, the hallway did not. His face tightened around a smile that almost looked professional. "Of course, Mr. Cole," he said. "We value every member of our team." The lie sat between us like a dirty plate nobody wanted to touch. Damien looked at him for one long second, then walked past both of us back into the dining room. I followed because I had tables waiting, because my mother needed medicine, because pride did not pay bills when the pharmacy lights went off at 9. For the next 40 minutes I worked like my body had stopped asking permission to hurt. Coffee refilled. Plates cleared. Wine poured. Apologies offered. My feet burned inside my worn black shoes, and every time my phone buzzed, I felt the sound somewhere behind my ribs. Damien did not call me over again. He finished his coffee, spoke quietly with the 2 men at his table, and watched the room with that cold patience that made other people reveal themselves by accident. When I brought their check, I placed it beside his cup without looking directly at him. "No rush, whenever you are ready." "Claire." I stopped. His voice was not loud, but it caught me like a hand on the edge of a cliff. I looked back. He had already placed a black leather check holder on the table. Beside it sat a plain cream envelope with my name written across the front in clean, steady letters. Not Miss Bennett. Not waitress. Claire. My stomach tightened. What is that? Your tip. My face warmed instantly. Tips go through the restaurant system. Not this one. One of his men looked away as if the conversation had become private. I lowered my voice. I cannot take that. Damien leaned back, eyes calm. You have not looked inside. I do not need to. You are allowed to be helped without being purchased. The words were gentle enough to hurt. I picked up the envelope only because leaving it on the table felt like making a scene. It was thick. Too thick. My fingers knew money by weight. And this was more than a generous tip. This was a problem. Mr. Cole. Damien. I am not calling you Damien. Something almost like amusement touched his eyes and vanished. Then do not. I held the envelope out to him. I am serious. I am grateful, but I do not sell my hardship to strangers. His expression shifted, not offended, not angry. If anything, he looked as if he respected the refusal more than the acceptance. I did not offer it because you suffered. Then why? Because you kept serving water to people who would have stepped over you if you fell. My throat closed. I hated him a little for saying it that clearly. I hated myself more for knowing it was true. That still does not make this your responsibility. No, he said. It makes it my choice. And what about mine? The question came out sharper than I intended. The air between us changed. Damien looked at the envelope, then back at me. Slowly, deliberately, he took it from my hand and placed it flat on the table. Then keep your pride, he said. But do not confuse help with ownership. I walked away before my face could betray me. In the service station, I pressed both palms against the counter and tried to breathe around the ache in my chest. I told myself I had done the right thing. I told myself dignity mattered. Then my phone buzzed again. Pharmacy closing in 20 minutes. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the cream envelope was no longer on Damien's table. His table was empty. The check holder was gone too. For one terrible second I thought he had taken it back and felt relieved. Then I saw Mark near the host's stand, slipping something cream-colored into the inside pocket of his jacket. My name flashed once under the chandelier light before it disappeared. I should have said something right then. I should have walked across the dining room, looked Mark Sullivan in the eye, and asked why my name was disappearing into his jacket pocket. But courage is not always loud when it first arrives. Sometimes it stands behind your ribs with trembling knees, trying to remember how to breathe. I stayed at the service station with one hand wrapped around the edge of the counter and watched. Mark moved through Sorrento's like nothing had happened. He smiled at guests, adjusted a candle on table 6, touched a server's shoulder as he passed, friendly enough for customers to believe he was kind. My phone buzzed again. 19 minutes until the pharmacy closed. The number made my decision for me. I crossed the room with empty hands and a pulse that felt too visible. Mark, I said quietly. He did not turn at first. Table 9 needs dessert menus. I need the envelope you took from Mr. Cole's table. That made him turn. His smile stayed in place, but his eyes sharpened. Excuse me. My throat felt dry. It had my name on it. You mean the unauthorized gratuity left outside house policy? He said it smoothly, like he had practiced stealing with a dictionary in his hand. All tips are processed through management. That was not restaurant money. While you are on my floor, everything involving guests is restaurant business. A couple at table 4 glanced over. Mark noticed and widened his smile. Lower your voice, Claire. Shame moved through me fast and hot. It always knew where to find me. I saw my worn shoes, my damp ponytail, the other servers looking away because they needed their jobs too. Mark stepped closer, voice dropping. You think a man like that gives money to girls like you for nothing? Do not be naive. I am protecting the restaurant. Frankly, I am protecting you from embarrassing yourself. The words should have made me shrink. They almost did. Then I saw Damien Cole standing near the entrance to the dining room. I had not seen him return. His black coat was folded over one arm, his face unreadable, his gray eyes fixed on Mark with a stillness that turned the room colder than the rain outside. Mark saw him a second later. The color changed beneath his skin. Mr. Cole, he said, recovering badly. There has been a misunderstanding. Damien walked toward us unhurried. Every table seemed to quiet in waves as he passed. Has there? Your gesture was appreciated, of course, but our policy requires all tips to be properly distributed. Damien stopped beside me, not in front of me. Beside me. Then distribute it. Mark blinked. Pardon. The envelope had her name on it. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. Give it to her. Mark's jaw tightened. With respect, you do not understand how this establishment operates. Damien looked around at the white tablecloths, the brass fixtures, the expensive smiles. I understand more than you think. I felt every eye on us. My face burned so badly I wanted to vanish, but my feet stayed planted. Mark must have seen that because his politeness cracked. Claire has been emotional tonight. She is tired. She makes mistakes. I was handling a delicate situation before it affected service. There it was. The public humiliation dressed as concern. The old trick. Make the woman look unstable, then call control kindness. Damien turned his head slightly toward me. Did you ask him to handle it? My voice came out quiet but clear. No. Something shifted in the room. Small but real. Damien looked back at Mark. Before she leaves this floor, I want to see your payroll records, your tip distribution logs, and your security footage from tonight. Mark laughed once, thin and nervous. You cannot be serious. Damien's eyes were cold enough to make the candles seem weak. I rarely repeat myself. For the first time since I had worked at Sorrento's, Mark Sullivan looked less like a manager and more like a man who had heard a locked door click behind him. Mark tried to laugh again, but the sound had nowhere to go. It came out thin, flat, and lonely under the chandelier light. Around us, Sorrento's had stopped pretending. Guests held forks above plates. Servers stood half-hidden near the kitchen doors. Even the bartender stopped polishing glasses. For one strange moment, the whole restaurant became a courtroom without a judge. Mark adjusted his tie and looked at Damien with the forced patience of a man speaking to someone he still hoped he could dismiss. Mr. Cole, I respect your concern, but you are a guest. You do not have the authority to request internal records. Damien reached into his coat pocket, removed his phone, and tapped the screen once. No, he said. But the owner does. Mark's smile disappeared. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. Damien did not raise his voice. He did not explain twice. He only said 3 sentences, each one quieter than the last, and somehow the air changed with every word. When he ended the call, Mark looked toward the front door as if he could hold it shut with his eyes. He could not. 7 minutes later, Anthony Russo walked into Sorrento's wearing a dark raincoat over an expensive suit, his silver hair damp from the weather, his face pale with the kind of anger rich men save for problems that might cost them money. I had met him only twice in 3 years. Once during a holiday staff photo. Once when he told us customer experience was family, then cut our meal discount the next week. He saw Damien first, then Mark, then me. His eyes lingered on my apron, my worn shoes, my face still hot from humiliation. What happened? He asked. Mark moved fast. A minor issue with the tip, Mr. Russo. I was handling it according to policy. Damien's gaze slid to the security cameras tucked above the wine wall. Then the footage should clear that up. Nobody spoke. That silence told me more than any confession could have. Anthony Russo turned slowly toward Mark. Bring the records. Tonight. Mark asked. Now. The next 20 minutes felt unreal. We moved from the dining room to the small office behind the kitchen, but the story followed us through every hallway. Maria came first, still wearing her server apron, hands folded tightly at her waist. Then Luis from the bar. Then Jenna, who worked weekends and always cried in the bathroom after closing but said it was allergies. One by one, people found reasons to stand near the office door. Nobody shouted. Nobody made accusations too big to carry. They just started telling the truth in small, tired pieces. Missing tips. Changed hours. Cash envelopes that disappeared. Schedule threats. Shifts given and taken away depending on who stayed quiet. Anthony Russo opened the payroll system with his jaw locked. Damien stood near the wall, silent, arms relaxed, eyes attentive. He did not interrupt. He did not perform rescue. That might have been the most dangerous thing about him. He made enough space for the truth to walk in on its own. Mark kept saying there had been errors, clerical mistakes. miscommunications, staff confusion. The words sounded weaker each time he used them. Then Luis handed over printed screenshots he had kept for months. Maria showed photos of tip sheets before and after Mark edited them. Jenna had voice messages. I did not even know what I had until I remembered the video on my phone from 2 weeks earlier, recorded by accident when I had set it against a stack of napkins during closing. Mark's voice was clear enough. His words were not kind enough to survive daylight. My hand shook as I gave the phone to Anthony. I expected Damien to look at me with triumph, but he did not. He looked almost sad, as if this was not a surprise, only proof of something he had seen too many times before. At last, Anthony closed the laptop and looked at Mark. "You are suspended pending a full audit." Mark's mouth opened. Nothing useful came out. For once he had no script that made him look powerful. The cream envelope was returned to me from his jacket pocket, unopened, my name still written across the front. I held it with both hands and felt something heavier than money inside it. Not salvation. Not debt. Witness. Damien walked me back into the dining room after Mark left through the side entrance with Anthony behind him. The restaurant lights seemed softer now, or maybe I had changed under them. Near the hostess stand, Maria touched my arm and whispered, "Thank you." I almost told her I had not done anything. Then I looked at the servers standing a little straighter than before, and I understood. Damien had not only seen me. He had opened a door for everyone Mark had taught to stay quiet. By the time the audit files were locked in Anthony Russo's office, the dinner crowd had thinned into quiet coats, signed receipts, and half-empty wine glasses. Sorrento's no longer felt like the same restaurant. The brass lights still glowed. The white tablecloth still looked expensive. The rain still tapped against the tall front windows. But something had shifted under the floorboards of the place. Something old and rotten pulled into the open air. Mark Sullivan was gone for the night, and for the first time in 3 years, the service hallway did not sound like his voice. I should have felt light. Instead, I felt hollow. My body had spent so many hours bracing for the next insult, the next threat, the next stolen dollar, that when silence finally came, it did not know what to do with itself. I stood near the coat room with the cream envelope in one hand and my phone in the other, staring at the pharmacy message that said payment accepted. I had paid the balance during the 10 minutes Anthony spent reviewing records. My mother's medication would be ready in the morning. The relief came so fast I had to lean against the wall. Damien Cole stood several feet away, speaking quietly to one of his men near the bar. He looked exactly as controlled as he had when the night began, black coat over one arm, charcoal suit untouched, gray eyes unreadable. But now I understood something I had not understood before. His power was not loud because it did not need permission to enter a room. He ended the conversation and turned toward me. "Your shift is over." That sounds like an order. It is an observation. I almost smiled, but exhaustion made it too difficult. I still have side work. Maria is doing it. She threatened to pour coffee on me if I argued. That time, the smile escaped before I could stop it. Small, brief, unfamiliar. Damien saw it, and something in his face softened by one careful degree. Then the moment passed. "It is late," he said. "The rain has not stopped," and Mark left angry. I folded the envelope into my purse. Mark lost access to payroll, not his ability to be dramatic. Angry men with wounded pride become creative. My smile disappeared. "I can take the bus. I can have my driver take you home." There it was. The offer. Clean. Polite. Dangerous in the way kindness could be when it came from someone who could afford to give too much. I looked toward the front door, where rain blurred Hanover Street into gold and black reflections. "I spent my whole life owing people," I said. "Landlords. Hospitals. Bosses. Even customers who thought a tip bought the right to treat me like furniture. I will not owe you too." Damien did not answer immediately. Most men filled silence with arguments when a woman refused them. He let mine stand. "You do not owe me for tonight. That is easy for you to say." "No," he said quietly. "It is easy for me to mean." The words unsettled me more than pressure would have. He reached into his coat and took out a black card with only his name and a number printed in silver. He placed it on the host's stand, not in my hand, leaving the choice on the polished wood between us. If you change your mind. I stared at the card. And if I do not? His eyes held mine. Then I hope you get home safe. He stepped back first. That was what ruined me a little. Not the money. Not the phone call to the owner. Not the way the room changed around him. The step back. The space he gave me to be stubborn, scared, proud, and wrong if I needed to be. I left through the front door with my coat buttoned to my throat and my purse pressed under my arm. The bus stop was 4 blocks away. Boston rain fell cold and steady, turning the brick sidewalk slick under my worn shoes. I made it 2 blocks before I noticed the dark sedan moving slowly along the curb behind me. At first, I told myself it was traffic. Then it stopped when I stopped. Moved when I moved. My hand slid into my purse and found Damien's card before pride could talk me out of fear. I stopped under the awning of a closed bookstore with rain running off the edge and silver ropes, and the dark sedan waiting half a block behind me. Its headlights were off, but the shape of it sat too still against the curb. Boston moved around me in wet fragments. A couple hurried past under one umbrella. A delivery bike cut through a puddle. Somewhere down Hanover Street, music spilled from a bar and vanished beneath the rain. My thumb hovered over Damien's number. I hated how quickly fear made the decision for me. He answered before the second ring. Claire. Not hello. Not who is this. My name steady and immediate, like he had been expecting the world to test my pride. I swallowed hard. There is a car. The street blurred through my wet lashes. It has been following me since I left Sorrento's. His voice changed without getting louder. Where are you? 2 blocks from the restaurant. Outside the bookstore on Hanover. Stay where people can see you. Do not approach the car. Do not go into an alley. Is there an open business near you? I looked across the street. A pharmacy. A coffee shop on the corner. Go into the coffee shop. Order something small. Sit near the counter. Keep me on the phone. Are you sending someone? I am coming. The answer should have frightened me. Instead, it loosened something in my chest I had been holding too tightly for years. I crossed at the light, every step measured, refusing to run because running made fear feel like a confession. The sedan rolled forward as I moved. My hand tightened around the phone. It is moving. I know. My breath caught. How do you know? Because my driver is behind it. I stopped so suddenly the man behind me almost bumped into my shoulder. You followed me? From a distance. Anger sparked through the panic. After I said no? After you said you did not want to owe me. I respected that. I also knew Mark had people who might try to scare you before morning. That is not the same as respecting me. You are right. The admission came fast enough to silence me. We can argue about that once you are inside. I pushed into the coffee shop and warm air wrapped around me, smelling like espresso, cinnamon, and wet wool. I ordered tea I did not want and sat on a stool near the counter, facing the window. The sedan paused outside for 10 long seconds, then continued down the block. My hand shook around the paper cup. Damien arrived 7 minutes later, black coat damp, dark hair touched by rain, gray eyes finding mine before he even reached the door. His driver stayed outside. Damien came in alone and stopped several feet away from me. Are you hurt? No. Scared. I almost lied. Then I was too tired to keep protecting a version of myself nobody believed anyway. Yes. His expression did not soften in the usual way. There was no pity in it. Only attention. Good. Fear is information. It is not weakness. I looked down at the tea. You should put that on a greeting card. For the first time I saw the faintest edge of a smile. It disappeared quickly, but it had been there. You have 3 choices, he said. I can call the police and stay until they arrive. I can call you a license cab and give you the plate number before it pulls up. Or I can take you home with my driver, and you can send his name, my name, and the route to anyone you trust. I stared at him. You are not going to tell me what to do? No. You are not going to say it is safer your way? It is safer my way. He paused. But safety that removes your choice is only a cleaner cage. The words settled between us, warm and frightening. I thought of Mark taking my envelope, customers snapping their fingers, bills deciding my hours, life putting its hands around every option until obedience looked like maturity. I will take the ride, I said. But I sit in the back alone, and I text my mother everything. Damien nodded once. Done. Outside my apartment building, rain softened to mist. He did not ask to come up. He waited beside the car while I stood under the broken entry light, keys in hand, suddenly unable to leave the question inside my chest. What do you want from me? Damien looked at me across the wet sidewalk, powerful enough to buy rooms, quiet enough not to step into mine. For once, he said, nothing. The next morning my mother's medication sat on the kitchen table in a white pharmacy bag, ordinary and miraculous at the same time. I watched her read the label twice, her fingers moving carefully over the print, and when she looked up at me with tears in her tired eyes, I nearly broke. Not because everything was fixed. It was not. Rent still existed. Bills still waited. My feet still hurt before each shift. But for the first time in months, the day did not begin with a locked door inside my chest. By noon, Anthony Russo called and asked if I would come to Sorrento's before opening to give a formal statement for the audit. My first instinct was no. No to rooms where Mark's voice still lived in the walls. No to being questioned, doubted, measured, and made responsible for the truth other people had helped bury. Then I looked at my mother's medicine, at the cream envelope tucked beside the coffee maker, at Damien's black card resting near my keys, and I realized fear had been answering for me long enough. I arrived at Sorrento's at 3:30 with rain clouds hanging low over Hanover Street. The restaurant looked strange in daylight, less magical, more honest. Chairs stacked on polished floors. White tablecloths folded over arms. The bar lights off. Without candlelight and dinner music, I could see every scratch in the brass, every stain hidden beneath the gloss. Maria was already there. So was Louise. Jenna sat near the hostess stand, twisting a napkin between her fingers. We looked at one another and understood without speaking. None of us had come because it was easy. We had come because silence had become too expensive. Anthony sat us in the private dining room with two accountants, a human resources consultant, and a lawyer whose suit looked more expensive than my monthly rent. Damien stood near the back wall, hands folded in front of him, not part of the table, not leading the conversation, just present. I noticed that he had chosen the farthest corner from me, close enough to remind me I was not alone, distant enough to make sure every word remained mine. That distance steadied me more than any speech could have. I told them about the envelope, about the missing tips, about the changed schedules and the way Mark made every request sound like a favor we had to earn. My voice shook at first. Then it stopped. The more I spoke, the more I heard myself returning. Mark arrived 20 minutes late with a lawyer of his own, and a face arranged into wounded innocence. He called it confusion. He called it pressure. He called us emotional, mistaken, ungrateful. Then his eyes found me across the table. Claire has always struggled, he said softly, almost kindly. Financial stress can make people misunderstand things. There it was. The old knife wrapped in velvet. A month ago I would have looked down. That day I did not. I struggled, I said. I did not misunderstand being stolen from. The room went still. Damien did not move. He did not smile. He did not rescue me from the silence. He let me stand inside it until it became mine. One by one the others spoke too. Maria, Louise, Jenna, even a dishwasher named Peter, who had never said more than 10 words to me during service, handed over printed time records with shaking hands. By 5 o'clock, Mark was no longer speaking. By 6, Anthony had agreed to back pay, outside review, and written protections for every employee who had come forward. When it ended, I walked out through the front door into the early evening air. The rain had stopped, leaving the street shiny in gold beneath the traffic lights. Damien followed a few steps behind me, still quiet. At the curb, I turned to face him. You did not say anything in there. His gray eyes held mine. You did not need me to. Something in me softened, not into weakness but into rest. All my life, people had noticed my tiredness only when it inconvenienced them. They noticed my mistakes, my lateness, my empty pockets, my need. Damien had noticed the part one had almost forgotten myself. The part that kept standing. The part that still chose dignity when life offered easier ways to survive. He looked dangerous in the fading Boston light, all dark coat and quiet power, But for once, danger was not the thing I felt most. I felt seen. And that was the beginning of everything.